Hello. So we are going to look at the IXL assignment R3 on the Pythagorean theorem, which is finding the missing leg or hypotenuse length. Before we begin, it's important to notate what the formula for the Pythagorean theorem is. And the formula is always going to be a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. This works for right triangles, okay? Notice that the hypotenuse is going to be this long side that is opposite from the right angle. Okay, so anywhere you see that indicator that this is a right triangle, the side directly across from that indicator is going to tell you that this is the hypotenuse, or C. This is the longest side of the triangle. Okay, it's going to have the most, as far as the length goes, it's going to be the biggest number. As far as leg A and leg B, those are kind of interchangeable, okay? So we can also call this B, and then we can also call this A. But you have to, when you're using the formula, one of them is going to be, this is going to be in the spot of either A or B, and then this side is going to be in the spot of the other one that you didn't use, okay? So you're gonna end up using all of the sides of the triangle, but the only one that's very important to notate that's in the correct spot is that hypotenuse, or C. Okay, let's look at some examples of this. Okay, in this case we have, it says, what is the length of the hypotenuse? If necessary, round your answer to the nearest tenth. Okay, so as we can see here, we have this indicator that is telling us that this is a right triangle. We know that this is going to be a 90-degree angle, which means even if this wasn't labeled as C, we would know that this side is going to be side length C, or the hypotenuse. Okay, it's always important. I always suggest writing the formula down first, always. This is a really good technique to help you memorize what the formula is. And then basically all you're going to do is you're going to look at the triangle and plug in the numbers right underneath. So we could call this A and we could call this B, and then we're just going to plug in our numbers. So we would say, okay, so we have 8 squared, and then we have 4 squared, which that's going to be all equal to C squared, which is what we're trying to find out. Okay. So in this case, 8 squared is the same thing as just 8 times 8, which is going to give us 64. Okay. And then 4 squared is just 4 times 4, which is going to give us 16. And this is equal to C squared. Okay. Now we're going to add these up. If we say, okay, 64 plus 16, that's going to give us an answer of 80. And then C squared just comes down. We're almost finished, but looking at this, there's one piece that we have to remember, okay? Anytime you have, and I'll write this over here, anytime you have a number or a variable and you're squaring it and you want to get rid of it, you want to get rid of that exponent, the inverse operation is going to be to find the square root of that. Okay, so in this case, we want to get rid of the exponent that's with C to leave C by itself. So we're going to find the square root of this side. And then anything we do to one side of the equal sign, we have to do to the other. Okay, so this is going to cancel for us, leaving us with just C. And now we have to find the square root of 80. Okay, we know the square root of 81 is 9, but that's too high. And we know the square root of 64 is 8. Okay, so we could say that this is going to be somewhere in that range of 60, or of 8 and 9. Okay, let's go ahead and just pull up the calculator for this one as well. So if we want to find the square root of 80, we're going to type in our 80, and then we're going to hit this button here. And that's going to tell us we have this 8.94427 big decimal, right? But the instructions on IXL tell us that we need to round to the nearest tenth. okay? Which means that we are only going to be going one place past that decimal. So we're going to look up here and we're going to say, okay, so this is 8.9. This is one place past the decimal. All right, right here. Now, with this, you always have to look to that next number. And if it's 5 or more, that's where you're going to raise up that number next to it. If it's 4 or less, we're going to let it rest. Okay, so in this case, we have 8.94, and we can see that 4 is less than 5. So we're just going to leave 9 alone. We're going to leave it as it is, and we're just going to drop everything off from the end here. So our final answer for this is going to be C is equal to 8.9 miles. Now, a good way to check this to just make sure that you got it correct is at the beginning of this video, we talked about how that hypotenuse has to be the greatest length, okay? It's going to be the biggest number that you have of that triangle. So if we check the sides, we have 4 miles and we have 8 miles, okay? And then this hypotenuse we're saying is 8.9 miles. So my question is for you, is 8.9 the biggest number? And we would say, yes, it is. 8.9 is bigger than 8. It's bigger than 4. So we did all the steps correctly. So it looks like it is a correct answer, and it is correct. All right. Let's look at another one with finding the hypotenuse. Okay. So here we have, we're still trying to find this hypotenuse, and we're looking at this indicator that shows us this is a right triangle. And we know that opposite of this indicator is going to be our hypotenuse of C. Even if it wasn't labeled, we would know that that is C. Okay, so again, we're going to write the formula. It's real easy, quick to write the formula every time. Helps you memorize it. Okay, a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. And we can label this as, we could say that this one is A, we could say that this one is B, and then we know that C has to be the hypotenuse. So A squared is 7 squared plus 2 squared is equal to C squared, which we are not sure what it is just yet. That's what we're trying to figure out. 7 times 7, or 7 squared, is going to be 49. And then 2 squared, or 2 times 2, is going to give us 4, which is all equal to C squared. And then we have 49 plus 4, which is going to give us 53, is equal to C squared. Now we can do that estimating again as far as what numbers we're going to be between, because again, this was one of those questions that says round the answer to the nearest tenth. So there's a possibility we're going to get a decimal. Okay. We know that the square root of 49 is 7. And we know that the square root of 64 is 8. So we know that 53 is going to fall somewhere between 49 and 64. So it's going to be somewhere between 7 and 8 is what our final answer is going to be. Okay, so we're going to take our calculator again. We're going to clear this out, and we're going to say, okay, 53, and we want to find the square root of 53. And we get 7.280109, big decimal, right? So now we have to look at the instructions. We have to say, okay, now we need to round it to the nearest tenth. The tenths place is going to be one place past the decimal, so we're looking right here at this range, 7.2. And then we're going to look to this 8, okay? Remember the rule. If it's 5 or higher, we're going to raise that number up. If it's 4 or less, we're going to let it rest. Since this 8 is higher than 5, we're going to take this 8 and we're going to bump this 2 up only by one place. Okay, so 2, we would go to the next number, which is 3. So we would say that our final answer is 7.3. So in this case, C is equal to 7.3 yards. And again, you can go through and check your answer, and we could say, okay, A is 7, B was 2, and then C is 7.3, and 7.3 is our biggest number. So we followed all the steps and we got it correct. Let's look at another a different kind of example. Okay, so with this IXL, you're going to see some where you're finding the hypotenuse, and then you're going to see some where you have the hypotenuse and you have to figure out what that missing leg length is. Okay, so again, this is our indicator showing us this is a right triangle. And this is telling us that this is the hypotenuse of this triangle. So we could say that this is C. And since we have A over here, we're just going to leave this as B. All right. So we're going to write our formula again. A squared plus B squared is equal to C squared. And then we're going to plug in our numbers. Okay, we're going to bring A down because we don't know what A is. We're trying to find that missing leg length. All right. B is going to be 2 squared. And then we know that C is 6. So C squared is going to go on the other side of the equal sign. Okay. And we're going to solve similar to the way that we were solving the last two questions. We're going to say, okay, A squared plus 2 squared, or 2 times 2 is 4. And then 6 squared, or 6 times 6 is 36. Okay, but now we're kind of in a situation where we have a variable and a number on one side of the equal sign, and then we have another number on the other side of the equal sign. So this is going back to that solving 1 and 2 step equations. We're solving for that missing variable, but now we have to do some inverse operations. So we're going to look at this plus 4, and we're going to say, okay, the inverse operation is going to be to subtract 4 from both sides of the equal sign. This over here is going to cancel for us, leaving us with just a squared to work with. And then 36 minus 4, okay, is going to give us 32. Now, again, with solving for variables with exponents, the inverse operation is going to be to find the square root of that number. So we want to leave A by itself. We don't want A with an exponent. So we're going to find the square root of both sides of the equal sign. This is going to cancel for us, leaving us with just A. And then we want to figure out what is the square root of 32. So we're going to say, okay, we're going to bring over our calculator. We're going to say, now, if we want to estimate this first, we could say, okay, so the square root of 36 is 6, and the square root of 25 is 5. And we could say 32 is between between 25 and 36. So we know that the square root of 32 is going to be somewhere between the numbers of 5 and 6. So we're going to take 32 and square root, and we're going to see, okay, we've got 5.65685. And again, the instructions for this are going to say round to the nearest tenth. The tenths place is only one place past the decimal, so we're looking right here. But we're going to use this number right here to tell us what we're going to do with that 6. Okay. So remember, if it's 5 or higher, we're going to raise it up. And if it's 4 or less, we're going to let it rest. So 5 or more, we're going to take this 5.6 and we're going to raise it to the next highest number, which is going to be 5.7. And then everything else is just going to be dropped from that. So we would say that A is equal to 5.7 inches. Okay. Now we can check this one as well, and we could say, okay, so our hypotenuse is 6, so that means the length of side A has to be less than 6, and it is, it's 5.7. So we followed the steps, we solved for the square root of 32, and we got an answer of 5.7. We're going to do one more that's similar to this one. I'm finding that missing leg length. Okay. If we have this question, and this one, the numbers are a little bit bigger, but it's still going to be solved the same way. All right, it's still going to have the same steps. In this case, we see that our indicator is right here telling us this is a right triangle. So we're going to say that, okay, this side is C. This is our hypotenuse, or 65 miles. And then we would say, okay, we have A here, so we're going to label this side as side length B. And then we're going to use our formula. Okay, we're going to say A squared plus B squared is equal to C squared. And we could see that, okay, we are still trying to figure out what a squared is, that side is. We know that b squared is 56 squared. And then we know that c squared is 65. Okay, now we're going to solve the same, using the same steps. We're going to say a squared plus, if you take 56 and you square it or multiply it by itself, we would say 56. We could either hit this with the square button, or we could say times 56. So that's going to give us an answer of 3,136. And then we're going to do the same thing with 65. We're going to say 65 squared, which is going to give us 4,225. Okay. Now, the next step is similar to the last one. We're trying to find out what a squared is, but we have this variable and this number on one side of the equal sign. So we need to get that variable by itself by doing those inverse operations. So in this case, we have a positive 3,136. So we're going to subtract 3,136 from both sides, minus 3,136. Oops. And there we go. This is going to cancel for us. And then we're going to say, okay, 4,225 minus 3,136. And that's going to give us an answer of a squared is equal to 1,089. Okay. Again, we're going to use those inverse operations of getting rid of that exponent to get a completely by itself by finding the square root of a squared and finding the square root of 1,089. This is going to cancel for us, leaving us with just a equals. And then we can take this and we can say 1,089, and we can find the square root by hitting this button. We can say the square root of 1,089 is 33. So we'd say this, the missing leg length is going to be 33 miles. Okay. You can also check this if you're not sure if these, using the bigger numbers, check it and just see what is 33 times 33? And that's going to give you 1,089. And you can also look and you can say, okay, I have 33 for A, and I've got 56 for B, and then I have 65 for C. And I can see that C is my biggest number, which is the hypotenuse. And so this would give us the correct answer.